Well, welcome back to video 2 of this video series that I'm releasing this week on training dogs the calm down command. In video 1, we talked about how one of the biggest obstacles to owning a dog who knows how to remain calm and under control when overly excited, overly anxious, or bothered is what I call your pet parenting style, and how certain styles of pet parenting create dogs who really struggle to stay calm. So if for some reason you haven't seen that video yet, make sure you click the link above this video and go watch that video first before watching this one, because what I'm about to show you today won't work if you don't understand how your pet parenting style is actually undermining your training efforts. So again, go check that video out if you haven't already, and then come back and watch this video, because I promised you today that I was going to show you the second step for how I took my chocolate lab, Griffin, who had that issue with getting way too excited about a ball, and show you how I cured his problem in less than a week by teaching Griffin the ignore it command. Now, there are several different types of ignore it commands, and you really should learn them all, but the one I'm going to demonstrate for you in this video today works because of two powerful principles. Now, I hinted at this principle in my last video, however it bears repeating, because I said if you've got a dog who is overreacting to something in his world, whether he's excited, concerned, or highly stressed and reactive around certain things, what I said in my last video is that you have no hope of fixing this behavior in your dog if you have not specifically taught your dog what acceptable behavior looks like. And normally when I ask people the question, describe to me how you want your dog to behave, their answers are usually something like, well, I want him to not jump up on me, or I want him to not bark when guests come over, or I want him to not lunge out at others while walking on a leash. And I could go on and on with examples of all the things folks tell me they want their dogs to not do, right? Yet, here's the problem with those types of answers. They're all focused on teaching your dog to not do something. And I don't want to get too technical with you here, but did you know there are only a few species of animals on Earth capable of understanding the concept of not doing something? Parrots are an example of one of these species that they've discovered can do this only very recently, because not doing is just a very hard concept for animals to grasp. And even when researchers have proven that a species of animal is capable of understanding the concept of not doing something, it's still very tough for that animal to actually execute on, especially when we ask them to do it in high stress, overly excited states of mind. So really, it's no wonder why dogs struggle to stop overreacting with traditional methods, because it simply isn't something their brains know how to do. It's just not wired that way. And that's why your efforts up until this point have probably failed, because they simply don't know how to not be excited, or to not bark at strangers, or to not lunge at others on a walk. So knowing this, what can you do? Well, fortunately, there's an answer. We just need to switch our focus from trying to get your dog to not do certain things, and instead we need to teach him what is called an incompatible behavior. So an incompatible behavior is a behavior that your dog can simply not do while continuing to do the bad behavior he's doing right now. They are like oil and water. The two simply don't mix. They can't coexist in the same space. So for example, in the video you're about to see, I'm going to focus on teaching Griffin to, instead of barking at the thing he wants in the video, which is his ball, I'm going to teach him to look at me in the eyes with his mouth shut. This is actually a double incompatible behavior, because he can't bark at the ball if he's looking at me, and he can't bark if his mouth is closed. So as you watch this video, I want you to pay attention to a couple of things for how I do this. First, in this video, you're going to notice that I'm doing the exercise to cure Griffin's overexcitement and his overreactions around wanting his ball. So what you need to know is that even if your dog doesn't have the excitement issue around a ball like mine does, this exercise will work for any type of excitement as long as you have one main thing covered. You simply need the ability to trigger your dog's excitement or his overreactions whenever you want. For me, all I got to do is throw the ball and he'll bark. For your dog, it's quite likely you'll need to trigger his overexcitement in a different way. So just know that how you trigger your dog to get overexcited doesn't matter. You just need to be able to do so. So if you find yourself watching the video and thinking to yourself, well, what if my dog is excited about something other than a ball? Well, will this still work for me? Well, yes, it will. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share some examples of how you can tweak this exercise to work for your dog's type of trigger that sets him off too. Whether he's set off by people coming into your yard, or other dogs, sounds on your TV, or whatever. Because over the years, my clients have figured out lots of clever ways to take this ignore it command and this training routine and adapt it to all different sorts of overexcited behavior. And I just want to make sure that you knew we were going to cover those adapting strategies at the end so you don't miss them. Now, as you watch this clip, I also want you to pay attention to a few things. First, realize that the footage was shot over the period of 1 week. And one of the things I've done is left much of the footage unedited for a specific reason. Most people don't understand how patient you have to really be in the beginning of training this behavior, so I wanted to leave the clips a little bit longer so that you can get a real sense for how long this actually is going to take with your dog. I know I always hate it when TV celebrity trainers use video editing to make it seem like they have magical powers, and I don't want to misinform you like they do. I want you to see the kind of effort this stuff really takes so that you don't lose hope on your first day if you end up having a dog like mine who didn't do well on his first day. So don't be expecting any magical powers out of me as you watch how I train my dog, the ignore it command. After he grabs the collar every time, you now have control and the ability to at least add a trigger of, no, you have to be within reach of me before I do something for you. It's the first step of him realizing that he can't just get his complete way. He's got to come to you and listen to your rules. That's an important thing to teach the dog so that it's step one, so we can move on from there. Now, obviously, he's also OCD. I don't know if you can tell, but he's thrown the ball to me about 15 times here, and he will continue to do so. So now what I want to do is I want to add a second layer onto this where I teach him to leave it. And this absolutely has to be taught or this behavior will get ridiculous. And so leave it is the next stage we're going to teach here. So it starts simple where we ask him to leave it by asking him to sit. I'm going to hold his leash because he's going to fail at this. And what we'll do is we'll just grab the awesomely slimy ball. And this is ideally not the first time you've taught leave it, but it would work. It might just take longer. This would be something you'd teach at food bowls, and like I teach in my other courses, teaching him to leave his food where he already understands the concept. But what we're going to do is teach him, well, I'll just show it to you. So we'll say leave it, throw the trigger, he fails, and what we'll do is we will wait till he makes eye contact. So with me, which might take a while, but what this does is this teaches him that I have to pay attention to Dad. I have to pay attention to Mom before I can have what I want. And we're using the leash to gain control of him. You notice I did not say leave it again. Well, I guess I just did in the description there. But you shouldn't double cue or triple cue. I've talked about that in my courses as well. And I could try to get his attention here. I would suggest that you don't try to do that because that's also another cue. I want him to just realize the pattern of you need to look at me before you can have the ball. And the second he does, I will let him go and we will start again. Again, you do not want to try to get his attention if you can help it. I mean, if we're here for 20 minutes, then that might be a problem and we should get his attention because we're bored. But if we can help it, we don't want to do that. We want it to be his decision. Animals that do that kind of thing, where they do it on their decision, it is ingrained in their brain 1,000 times more than when you dangle a piece of cheese in front of you to get their attention. Oh, he almost looked at me, but he didn't. He looked like the house behind me. He's at least not paying attention to the ball 100% of the time. You can see just how much of a problem this is and how much control he needs to gain. If I was going to try to get his attention, I might just do it by walking back and forth, just so that I could try to turn him, and it still be his decision. Oh, and you absolutely don't want to let go of him while he's barking. Okay, so if your dog's doing this, I'm going to just take a couple of steps. I'll stand up and I'll walk. He still hasn't looked at me. I'm just going to try to get him to... Good! There, he did it. I didn't have to move. Perfect. Then we do it again. Actually, I'm going to reward him a little bit. He brought it back. We'll give him a little bit of a play so that this whole training session isn't just obviously pent-up stress like you saw. He obviously had a need to have a cigarette kind of a reaction. So we want to give him a little release. Maybe I'll throw the ball 2 or 3 times. That also helps him realize this is fun, right? Because obviously he loves this ball throwing game. So we want him to think training's fun. So as we come out every morning or evening or whenever you do your training, he's excited to train. This is a happy time. And it's not just another thing where he shuts down. Because if you make this all about you controlling him and he doesn't get anything out of it, the dog will shut down, he'll listen to you less, he'll respond quicker, your training progress will be worse, and it doesn't go well. So I'll give him one more ball throw and then we'll repeat that exercise again. Leave it. Let's see if he gets this faster this time. See, this is one of those life cue skills, which is the whole key to being able to have a dog who's automatically in control of his emotions. I don't want every cue for good behavior to come from me. I want life to give him cues. And this is one of them, called, when fun things happen, I need to ask Dad. He is doing better, you can see, at not totally being 100% laser focused on the ball. Good! I think I'll actually not use the word good, and I'll use the word okay. And then it's 3 more ball throws again. You can see that happened a lot faster. And if you just keep at this all the time, eventually you'll throw the ball, he'll do a quick turnaround, he'll obviously know what to do, and we can then move on from there. We can do it again. Leave it. It's pretty terrible leave it, actually. Probably need to make sure you can't do that. So each time you... Good! You saw how much faster it's going. I won't bore you with teaching him how he gets it all the way to instant. I'll go back, I'll do some training over the next couple days until it is instant for you, and then I'll show you the next steps after that. Good boy. Now it's all play. Okay, so that was day 1 of Griffin's training. And over the next several days, what I did was repeated the process, and he was making progress until, as you'll see, he had a regression. And your dog might too. So what I had to do was dig a little deeper into my bag of training tricks and start to use a technique known as a jackpot reward. And what I want you to pay attention to in this next clip was how appropriately using the jackpot reward allowed Griffin's training to finally click and completely cure his barking at the ball. This is shot 4 days after that last clip, and pay no attention to how I obviously don't know how to flip down my collar in the video. My wife apparently let me dress myself on the day I filmed this. Quiet. Oh, not going to be a good start today, huh? You've been doing excellent until this. This doesn't look like we've made any progress, Griffin. Camera's lying.
Oh, you want daughter in the shot?
That's okay.
Okay.
So I think what this needs, and why there might not be much practice, is because we're not using the jackpot reward effectively. So I'm going to try this again, and then I'm going to go show you what I mean with a second piece of equipment. So let me try something else, and let's see if this works. I have 2 balls here, and we have a bit of a jackpot, like we talked about earlier with the throwing of it. So, but we're going to do it a little bit differently. Let's see. Ready, Griffin? Leave it. That didn't work any better, did it? The knowing that a jackpot is possible has him paying attention about 1 billion times better. And the key that you want to do with the jackpot that I didn't mention in the other video, and in fact I was doing it wrong, is instead of having the jackpot be after he brings the ball back and throwing it again, this is now just immediately given. It immediately, the second I throw this, tells him he's done the job right. I don't need to say anything else. That's enough to deliver the jackpot to him. And as you could see, just knowing it was there was immediately more effective for the dog. Leave it.
So there you have it. That is step 1 of how to train an ignore it command, where we teach your dog to perform an incompatible behavior
every time he sees that trigger that sets him off. And before I show you how to make some modifications to this exercise to help you use this to tame your dog's type of trigger, if it's a different one than a ball, I need to just warn you real quick about the dangers of just using this first step in this process. And maybe you even noticed the problem in this video already, because while this method taught Griffin what acceptable behavior looks like, where he looks me in the eye now with a closed mouth, it's actually built up more anxiety and more excitement in Griffin to get to his ball than we started with. The scientific community describes this effect as building what is called play drive. And while I have done that here in this video to get him to stop barking at everything that he wants, it's just scratching the surface on what emotion coaching style of pet parenting would need to do. Sure, I have taught him a better way to ask for his ball, which had to be done. But if you were to go back and watch the footage again, you would notice that while Griffin is no longer barking, his efforts to control his desire for that ball have him quivering with anticipation as he looks back at me, just barely waiting for the release command to go after the ball, because his emotions aren't yet under his control. Internally, he's even less relaxed than he was before. He's just now doing it quietly. In fact, deep down, you probably know this. Like if you've ever seen a dog act like this before, where he's so locked in and so focused on one thing that he simply can't contain his emotions, right? And while we might giggle and laugh and think it's so cute how excited dogs like this are, it's actually a huge problem that we have to solve if we want to teach your dog how to remain calm. Plus, there's now another issue that we've created while fixing this behavior that I'll show you how to solve later, by the way, because now I have to have that ball thrower on me, right? If I want the dog to actually listen, which means that if I'm in a place where I can't unleash Griffin and throw him that ball because of leash laws, for example, then I'm not going to be able to use this tool yet while out in the real world. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of this so that you don't try this, see it start to work for your dog, and then be bothered about how it only works if you have a good reward on you. Because like I said, this is a three-step process. So just because I've given you a great tool for teaching your dog what is unacceptable, where he now is at least polite about what he wants, that doesn't mean we're done yet. Which is why in my next video, I'm going to teach you another exercise that builds off of what we've taught your dog so far and shows you how to get your dog to still do this behavior, but now do it calmly, where we really start to get into the emotion coaching style of pet parenting, where the real magic starts to happen. It's a new command that we'll be teaching your dog called the chill out command. Kind of helpful, right? Where it literally gives you the ability to not just have your dog look like he's calm, like we did in this video, but where he's still quivering with desire for his ball, but to actually calm down emotionally and internally to the point where if you had the ability to measure your dog's heart rate during the training process, what you'd notice after teaching your dog this next command in my next video that I'm releasing is that when you see your dog get stressed out or too excited with his heart rate spiking, what this command would do is actually physically lower your dog's heart rate and do it on command, calming down his emotional overreactions. And we do this by bypassing the logical part of your dog's brain in a very clever way that I'm really excited to share with you. Again, that video is called the chill out command, so you'll want to make sure and stay tuned to your emails as I get set to release it here in a couple of days, as I'll be shooting you off an email once it's up and live for you to come check out. Yet for now, let's wrap this up by sharing some of those clever strategies I talked about earlier, where some of my clients have modified this exercise that I've just shared with you for different types of triggers in their dog's world. Because if you were to break this exercise down, I'm really only doing a few things. So when you're going to look to replicate this exercise with your own dog and his own triggers, as long as you can find a way to replicate these triggers, you can modify this exercise for getting your dog to ignore any trigger in his world that sets him off. And the first step in this process is that you need to simply have the ability to expose your dog to his trigger whenever you want. And step two is you need to be able to pick an incompatible behavior that suits your dog's problem. And when you have those two things, and you can be set up to spend 15 minutes a day exposing your dog to his trigger over and over, like I've done in this video that I showed you today, you can have the same results with your dog too. So if you've got a dog who's triggered by sounds, this is really pretty simple. Simply get yourself a way to trigger the sound at the push of a button. And if you've got a TV program that sets your dog off, simply record it on your DVR and have someone simply play the clip over and over again to replicate your trigger. If you have a doorbell reactive dog, I'd strongly consider buying a new doorbell, one that can be remotely triggered, and doing this exercise where you have your dog restrained in your house instead of outdoors on its leash as you press the doorbell and repeat this exercise, but doing it inside instead. There's also a brand of motion sensor that you might consider getting if you have a doorbell reactive or territorial reactive dog called a Dakota Alert. This is a sensor that will trigger a doorbell chime when it sees someone walking by its sensor within 100 feet of its little sensor. And if you will train your dog to do this behavior, this taming of the trigger, this incompatible behavior where he looks at you when he hears the trigger that I showed you in this video, but instead of doing it at the side of a ball like I did, do it to the sound of this motion sensor, and you do this before you install this motion sensor, then you can have pre-trained your dog how to respond before you ever set it up in the first place and he ever hears the chime. Then if you've got a dog who's triggered by other dogs, let's say, one of the things you can do is simply find a friend with another dog who can walk out from behind a fence or behind a building with her dog to be that trigger for your dog, where you then do this exact same exercise, but do so by having your friend's dog be the trigger instead of a ball like I used. And then lastly, one of the cleverest strategies I've ever heard was from a woman who lived in a suburban neighborhood next to an elementary school, whose dog was always super bothered and territorial every day as kids walked by on their way home from school. So what she did is she started bribing some of these kids with candy, where she would simply ask them to walk through her yard after school each day on their way home. And because she was a stay-at-home mom and was always home during this time of day, it just became a simple routine that she did around 3:30 every afternoon with her dog, where she eventually recruited 10 kids to show up every day for the free candy if they helped her with this training, where all they had to do was walk into her yard, stop when they heard the dog barking, and then once the dog was quieted by the woman training the dog the replacement behavior inside, the kids were just instructed to simply walk off. And then the next kid would go up and repeat the process, walking back into the yard and so on and so forth until she had the behavior fixed. So I thought that was a really clever solution to a really annoying problem. And as you can see, feel free to get clever with this exercise, because as long as you can find a way to cleverly trigger your dog's excitement a handful of times during a training session each day, you too can train your dog to ignore his trigger. And please feel free to get creative on the kinds of incompatible behaviors you train your dog to do too, and share them with me on how you plan to use this exercise with me in a comment below. Not only would I like to hear from you on how you're going to implement this technique, but the more clever ideas you can leave as a comment below this video, the more helpful this video will be for people who maybe aren't sure about how they can trigger their dogs over reactions or how they can pick the best incompatible behaviors for their dog situations. So let's talk about those in the comments below. So leave me a comment below on the type of method you plan on using for triggering excitement during this training exercise, along with the incompatible behavior you're planning on training below. And I look forward to reading through your responses and helping you choose the best way to trigger your dog's overreactions and incompatible behaviors. And as always, if you like the video, please don't hesitate to like it on Facebook or share it with your friends. The more folks who start training their dogs this stuff, the better. And of course, look for my next email here in a few days with my next video, the Chill Out Command. And I'll look forward to seeing you back here then. Happy training, everyone.